First of all, hey, we apologize for the things. We did everything we were supposed to do. We tested it. We got on early. We did everything. But, electronics are, in my world, something we always have to deal with in band land. So first, my name's Jordan, and I'm the ensemble director for Rhythmic Force Percussion. We're an independent percussion group based out of Austin, Texas. We're glad to be online, sort of-ish, with you today. I'm happy to volunteer our platform for Coty and to do her presentation for you guys. In order to expand our media, we had teamed up with Marimba One and a company called the Den Collective. I don't know if you've heard of those companies. Marimba One is a global percussion manufacturing company, and the Den Collective is like an online e-commerce platform that does coaching sessions, master classes, and summer sessions from the world's leading music industry professionals. Alex is my media manager. I want to thank him for trying to get this to work right now. And Jonathan's our operations director, and he helps me run the group as it is. We do ask that you do not make any recordings of the material as it belongs to Coty, but we will get it shared out for you at her discretion. I'm gonna let Rebecca Knox, if she's still in.
I'm here.
Herself too.
I'm Becky Knox. I'm here representing Coty Educators of Texas. We are sponsoring Coty as well today. We're an organization that provides support and resource for music educators. And if you want to know more about us, I welcome you to go to our website, cotytexas.com, or hit us up on social. KET is also accepting donations on behalf of this burgeoning project, which will be research-based in social-emotional learning with a focus on providing resources, building anti-racist classrooms, and emphasizing equity. All funds will go directly to this project. There will also be a Google form dropped in the chat and on the event page. We're probably gonna be working all this out. After the broadcast, it'll probably be at the very end of the broadcast, which will enable you to donate, provide feedback, and earn CPE hours. Please be on the lookout for the code during the presentation, and that might be one of us speaking it or putting it in the chat. And that will need to be entered exactly in order to receive credit. Feel free to PM me if you're having issues. We also asked, is our chat enabled, Jordan?
I enabled it, but the meeting is on, so it may.
Okay. Well, we're gonna ask that you avoid typing in the chat during the presentation until Coty asks you to, and she will ask you to. Think of this as a way to lean in and not be distracted. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Andre Jackson.
Hello, my name is Andre Jackson. A lot of you know me as Dre. I'm the head director at Marble Falls Middle School, and I'm just offering here. I'm here to offer my voice, my perspective as a 30-year-old black educator in this kind of country. Just want to help uplift Coty and her message. I stand by it. I stand for it, and I'm here again to just offer you another resource to ask or to talk to or to reach out to. I'll include all of my information in the chat at the end of this. But for right now, I want you to get your pen and pencil ready, get your paper ready, sit back and just listen. Take this in. I am so excited, and I'm humbled that you are all here. And I would just like to welcome Coty Raven Morris. Go ahead, homie.
I hype myself up. Thank you. Hype. All right, do we have the chat feature going, or is that working yet?
Not yet, Coty. We're troubleshooting.
Okay. Well, let me go ahead and get my share on of my screen. And we're gonna do this, and we're gonna click here and put that this way, shape, and form. Can everyone see all the things? And can you see my face? Love that for us. Look at that head. We took that in the choir room at Michigan State University, and that is the curtain. God will always make a way. In the clutch, we will make a way. All right, so welcome to this dream baby of all of ours in the collective. And I'm really excited to present this to you. And first and foremost, I just want you to think about it as a collective breath. I'm not here to beat you up. I'm not here to chastise you. I'm not here to belittle you. or you're going to have a whole bunch of different content that you hear today. So thank you for coming with an open heart and just giving up, you know, your Sunday for this moment. I'm a teacher, so there has to be an agenda. So we're going to start with a little bit of my story and how did we get here. We're going to go through a few definitions. How does racism impact different aspects of our life in our classrooms? And we're going to answer some questions. What can I do? How do I have the conversation? And what resources are available, or what resources can I use? First and foremost, let's create the safe space that I was talking about. I am not an expert, or I'm not the expert in this. I'm an expert on many things because I've done the work, and we're going to do some work together. But please do not take my words as the end all be all. There are so many great resources that I want to guide you to. Let's acknowledge that this makes a lot of people uncomfortable, and some of those people may not be here today, but let's just acknowledge that this is going to make you a little bit nervous, and that's okay. We're going to just step forward with confidence. Have patience with yourself and others as they soak in this knowledge, which leads me to the second one. If you come to the table, be ready to eat. Really, I'm saying the same thing in 3 different ways. If you show up to the kitchen, you know, show up to the table and things make you uncomfortable, you have to have an open heart. And so if your heart's not ready, then you can't have the conversation yet. And that's why we're going to take the collective pause, and we're going to stop right now. Make sure that we're ready to do this together. And what I present today may not be the exact dish for you, but hopefully it has the ingredients that you need. So let's stir up the pot, right? Let's get to the good stuff. For my musician friends, you're going to hear me make a lot of musical references, but we're going to lean into the dissonance. When the plates of the earth clash into each other, right? What do we get? We get mountains. We get beautiful land masses. And if we live a life where we keep trying to avoid tension and avoid conflict, then we will never get to the meat of a situation. And that's how things overflow with tension. So we just want to make sure that we are leaning into the dissonance so we can have an actual resolution of beauty. What we are not going to do today, we cannot solve everything today. We're here for about an hour, hour and a half max. I want to make sure that I don't monopolize your time with my voice and give you time to use your voice and digest what I'm saying. We can't end racism or sexism or anything in 60 minutes. Like, that's all we have, right? But we have to start this conversation. We can't restructure all of your curriculum in a day. I can't, if you're a teacher, I don't ask that you go into the fall and then throw everything you know out of the book, but we do need to reevaluate. What is the purpose of what we're doing? Does it serve every child? We're not being political unless we're talking about policy. We're talking about human lives here. We're talking about not having a life of survival, but actually being able to thrive, okay? And we can't end the conversation ever. This needs to just be part of our vocabulary. And we're not proving how woke we are. This is not me when I made my post this weekend and wanted to do all this, it wasn't to say, I know this and you don't, and I judge you. We want to make sure that we can learn from each other. And I hope this is just content that you can learn from. You're going to hear me say a lot in this presentation, change your words to change your heart. And I had a deep conversation with one of my professors from MSU, Dr. David Rail, about the key to changing the heart is changing your vocabulary. I did this at the presentation I did at TMEA. If you're not used to that, it's Texas Music Educators Association. When I did the diversity session there, the first one, and we did a chant together when we sang, "What side are you on, my people? What side are you on?" We on the freedom side, right? And we think about the amount of information and the names, you know, the hashtag say their names. When we see George Floyd, when we see the other Black brothers, sisters, and our in between that have died at the hands of police brutality or have been persecuted unfairly, we've been saying names forever. The whole point of that chant that I just did was to acknowledge the people who stood up and the people who were on the front lines of a protest and who were advocating, and they looked like all sorts of shades of the rainbow, because it was not a us versus them. It was humanity versus injustice. It was humanity versus hate. So don't be shocked when you hear, those references often. And remember, you showed up. The first step before you run out into the streets and do something is that you show up to the conversation. So again, thank you for being here. All right, so 3 things. When you see the cute little clock in the hands, that means that I'm gonna pause and that I have something for you to read, okay? We're about to go into a review session, but I'm going to set a timer. And if you have your pencil and paper, I'm going to give us 1 minute. And in this 1 minute, it's a moment of accountability versus a moment of silence, which a lot of people have interpreted in many different ways. In your moment of accountability, you can pray, You can write with a purpose what your goal is today. You can go ahead and take a moment to acknowledge where you are, your shortcomings in this journey and where you would like to be, or the charge of where you want to go. But will you, let's take a moment for accountability. You have 20 seconds left. All right, let's dive right into it, friends. In order for us to have productive conversations, we need to make sure we have our vocab on lock. We cannot have holes in our narrative. Culture, race, and ethnicity are not the same thing. So let's define some things real quick. Here's a moment for us to read. Now I can't quite see the definition just because of how my Zoom is set up in the presentation, but just to clarify, when it comes with race, it's the social construction and categorization of people based on a perceived shared physical traits, that result in the, does it say maintenance? Or the maintaining of socio-political hierarchy, right? It is made political. It's our skin color, it's our collective skin colors made to be political. But we can talk about definitions all day. Let's talk about these things in practice. So if I were to use these things out loud, right? My ethnicity is what makes up my DNA, what makes my melanin. Every time I say the word ethnicity, I touch my skin because it comes straight down to what runs through my blood, okay? Biology. My culture is the fact that I was born in Louisiana, okay? And so I have these Cajun roots, I have these Bayou Creole roots, really, not Cajun roots, Creole roots. And then I moved to Texas. And so I have this Southern ancestry and a dialect in which I speak because of the people that I grew around, but I also hopped across that state line a couple of times in my youth. And I always joke around with my, with some of my Northern Black friends that my culture says that we only put seafood and sausage in our gumbo, and your culture may say that you put chicken. And I'm not a big fan of that gumbo, but you know what, that's your culture and I respect that and I love that about you, and that's what makes you special and what makes you beautiful. Okay, so culture is based on a lived experience, not just ethnicity, but race. Race is what people perceive based on colors and stereotypes, right? So if we take race and we go down history, people are enslaved, and then given and then told that they're different and told to do certain things and put in positions where they have no power, okay? They have no control over their lives. Race is tied into privilege because it's the idea that I look at you and I call you something and then I get upset, you do not fulfill the roles in which I've told you to fulfill, okay? So one is concrete, one is behavioral, and one is structural, okay? Concrete, we're gonna have our ethnicity. Behavioral is culture, and structure is race. Be cautious of how we use the word culture, because sometimes when we talk about that culture, it's code for Black. So we need to really make sure what we're saying when we use these vocabulary words. Let's review exactly what racism is. Here's a reading moment. I'll give you about 30 seconds. the reason I like the way that this definition is laid out is it's based on the perceived balancing in favor of an oppressor over someone else, okay? Another way that I like to describe racism is the game has been rigged from the beginning. I heard a sermon even earlier today as when we're talking about football players and we have one team and then we have another team and they're clashing and they're clashing and they're clashing. But what is it always comes down to? A ref's call. In this case, the ref is a structural system that has already been in place. So despite what you may see, there is something else making a call here. That's what we're going to address today. If I continue on, I want you to know, let's talk about how did we get to where we are? How did we get to even needing this Zoom meeting? Well, as I've spoken to other people, including my therapist, it's the perfect storm. When you really think about it, this was the perfect storm of the situation. We have had tension in this country for years. And if you look at the picture on the bottom left, we have a history of taking small chunks of victory, just small chunks. A lot of people will say, well, what's the big deal? And haven't Black people come so far? Haven't this group come so far? But have we really? I think we have a history of celebrating small victories and letting our foot off of the gas pedal. We see change and they're like, great, that's enough. And that's enough for everybody, but it really isn't. And when there's holes in a narrative, if people find an opportunity, they will fill it in with whatever they want. And then with the upping of social media, or with the emergence of social media, we have simultaneously been able to broadcast and advertise, and I use that word on purpose, advertise the pain of marginalized groups at the fastest rate we ever have, while losing the ability to have quality conversations. We've replaced conversations with clicks and comments, and then we have this privilege to turn it off. We have the ability to say our words and then escape it and not actually have to process, not actually have to continue. Pair that up with a global pandemic with COVID-19 and then stay-at-home procedures, and you're at home boiling. You're at home simmering, okay? And this pot that has been on the stove has been simmering for over 400 years. A lot of people feel like this came out of nowhere. It's sheer chaos. No. People have been feeling this way for a very long time, okay? So you may have just noticed that the pot's on the stove and boiling, but it's been on there for a hot minute. So let's talk about privilege. Here's a reading moment for you. I will give you 30 seconds. I like to give the following example when I talk about privilege. I am tall. I've been 5'9" since I was 11 years old. I actually remember growing. And we didn't have a lot of money, and my grandma couldn't buy a lot of clothes, so my pants were high waters, and I was sloshing in the water, and I got to school, you know? But I've always been this tall, as long as I can remember. And I've had friends and people in my life who were not as tall as me, who were short. I didn't ask to be tall. I just am. No one has to call me out for being tall. I can see, I can recognize that I am tall. But let's say I didn't know that, right? No one who is short is asking me to pick them up. They don't want me to throw them across the fence. They don't ask that I grab things and bring it down to them. They don't want me to lower standards and lower things for them. The question here is, why is there something, if there's a fence in front of me, why is this fence in front of me in the first place? This is not about, privilege is not about lowering standards or giving people handouts. It's about questioning why there is an object in front of us that only works for certain people like me who are tall. So talking about privilege and talking about white privilege is not asking people to do things or to give out handouts or lower standards. It's about addressing and acknowledging that there is an object in the way of certain people based on color. And we need to remove that object in order for us to actually have equity. So who are you? Well, you need to know a little bit about me. If you want to know my resume, if you want to see the bio, you can go to CotyRavenMorris.com. I don't want to talk about accolades. I want to talk about who I am. I am a 32-year-old Black woman, born and raised in New Orleans, and then I grew up in Texas. You are white, Black, biracial, or non-Black, coming from a multitude of different communities and perhaps teaching a multitude of different types of kids. You may be angry and looking for alternatives. I was angry when I saw the footage of George Floyd being murdered. And I've always been angry when I see those things. And then you try to have these conversations in circles of friends and colleagues and professors and teachers and whoever, and I was having, it's the pushback, because there are microaggressions that we will address later. There are things that are saying that that conversation is politically correct. This is not the time, this is not the space. And so you're boiling with that inside. You may have what I call survivor's fatigue. You're exhausted from sharing your story. I've been looking at my phone all week and having conversations with people, and then having to make the conscious decision to take a break. But at the same time, you can't help but talk to people, and you can't help but go on Instagram or go on Facebook, and you just see this pain over and over and over and over. But what brought me to want to do this for you is when I saw a video of a young child who was non-Black, who was at the protest, and she could be no older. She was no older than 10 years old. And she had just been pepper sprayed in the face. And I will never forget the sound of that girl screaming. And it was the tears that I had when I saw that video that made me go on Facebook and say, we need to do something. And then when I sat, when I sat with that thought and that image, and I could still see it in my face, in my eyes right now, when I sat with the thought and the image of that young girl crying, I had to ask myself, why was I so shocked to see that? But why had I become desensitized to seeing murder? Some of your Black friends, most if not all of your Black friends, have become trauma desensitized to seeing actions against people who look the same. And the expressions of that are coming out in a multitude in the streets and communities. And all I knew is that I may not be able to do something from the top, but I can start with kids. We can start with kids. We can make a new generation, and we can put beautiful knowledge and concepts in their heads so that they can be part of something new. They can be part of a world in which that fence does not exist. Some of you discovering and acknowledging your privilege for the first time, and you may be lost for words. But even I, in this conversation with this thought I had, I was encountering a lot of interactions that looked like this. For those of you, especially with the first pandemic that we saw collectively together of COVID, these are SEL concepts, social emotional learning concepts. So now a lot of us are trying to begin that research and get that knowledge, and this is a good place to start. We have three types of people: the fighters who are fatigued and those who are fearful. Fighters, the visceral response here, right? The gut reaction is anger. They might be narcissists. They might be closed-minded people, do-nothing people. The vocabulary from that is, well, back in my day, or the way that it used to be, or this is how it's always been, and not understanding that the norm has not worked for everybody. It only worked for some bodies, okay? You have the fatigued people, the visceral gut reaction is helplessness. I call another example of this is low-hanging fruit advocacy. So that's when people are Googling and they find the first link and then they share it. They don't fact check it. They don't converse with anybody. And then they go on fact, right? They just say that that's a fact. Having a lack of empathy, which we'll talk about a little bit today, running low on bandwidth and not slowing down to take care of yourself. And so then you're running out of steam. And wanting to have institutional change before classroom change. That's what I'm talking about is, yes, we want to see policies change and we want things above our head, but we don't start with our children. We start with things right at home. We don't start with conversations. And then we go, oh, well, since that bill didn't pass, oh, well, since I can't affect on the top, then I might as well not fight this battle at all. That's not going to work. Fear, the response is guilt. I don't want to offend anybody. The amount of conversations that I've had prior to this of running into a conflict and then people saying, well, I'm just scared to say anything, so I won't say anything at all. Denise Eaton says, and she's talking about behavior in the classroom, she says delayed obedience is disobedience. Another way to think of that is your lack of participation makes you complicit. So we'll get into that in more detail later on. Not knowing what to say, not having appropriate resources. And then this other thing of true ignorance. If for some reason you lived a life or you lived in a town or you just didn't know. There are people that I have known since I was a kid, or when they were a kid, they grew up in very diverse populations. I have a friend that's new to my life who is in her late 20s, and she met her first Black friend when she was 26. She just did not know. I can't go to her and slap her all the time and judge her for just not knowing. We wouldn't do that to a kid, so why do we do that with adults? There has to be some source where we can slow down and educate people, right? Thank you, Taylor Mills, for allowing me to continue to use this as a resource. In her dissertation, she talks about closed system conversations and equilibriums. Imagine it like this: we have a confrontation. Someone comes to us and they say something. Then we internalize it, and I can't quite see my word in yellow with the Zoom feed. I wonder if I can, oh, there I did, I moved it. And then we internalize it and we have a perceived threat to self. There's a visceral response, and then a privilege equilibrium happens, right? We do something to balance the scales, and then we go back to a state of complacency. Let's use this in action. Black Lives Matter. Someone internalizes that. They perceive a threat and they respond with what? All lives matter. That's the way of trying to balance a privilege scale. If we don't address it, what's happening now are people are actively addressing it. Then we go back to a sense of complacency, and then we're bound to have this confrontation again. It also looks like I'm not racist because insert surface level thing here, right? It looks like what happens when we encounter a problem with a student, and then instead of getting to the meat and bones of it, we just dismiss a kid and throw them out of class. But because we don't have concrete evidence, we don't have documentation, what happens, that kid is right back in our class again. We're bound to run into the same conflict again and be in the cycle. Or one that I grew up hearing is, why do you make everything about race? There's only one race, it's the human race, which demeans who I am. It demeans the conversation that I'm trying to have. And so now that person doesn't know it, but they've shut the door on a conversation. What we want to happen is, what if we internalized and then we stopped and processed and actually tried to have an open system creativity? What if we think or use our imagination to find a different way to approach a situation? What if we open our ears for empathetic listening? What if we reinterpret our visceral response? Someone said this to me: why did it hurt? Does it hurt at all? Is this a real threat? Or does it conflict with something that I have been taught and I grew up with the notion? Then we come back using STEM sentence that I'll provide. We come back and we reorientate ourselves into the situation. And then we're actually going to be able to have an engaging, productive step forward. Let's take a moment to read this definition of empathy.
Coty, can I give you guys some updates from Rhythmic Force Percussion? On our Facebook page, we are posted a video with the Den Collective. Their live feed is working, so this is now broadcasted. We will send the forms out through the Rhythmic Force page and all of the media sponsors we had intended to at the end.
Thank you, Jordan.
Yep, you're welcome.
Like a little angel from above. What I highlighted in our empathy definition, that when someone shares their feelings and experience and thoughts with us, that we can digest it without having their feelings be objective. I said that incorrectly. Let me reform that. When you share your feelings with me, I don't have the opportunity to take that and twist it into my own words or to my own interpretation. No one else has the right to tell you how you feel. So you have to stop and process that and then re-engage yourself back in. I hope I help make that make sense. What are the stakeholders here? When we talk about of a balancing of scales, right? Of there being something that says that it's superior in order to oppress someone else, we hear words like dominant. If there's dominant, there must be foreign. If there's white, there must be black. If there's native, there must be ESL. If there's tradition, there must be popularity. If there's music, there's noise. And what we're actually saying is, if there's an us, then there's a them. And we eliminate so many other voices from the conversations when we do that. we sharpen our identity by making sure that there's an enemy. There has to be something else that is othered. Some of you may have not known that you were even in these positions of privilege. A moment that I remember when I was 12 and I was in New Orleans, my grandmother passed away, and then I was out of school for a window of time. And I'm moving to Texas. The school year had already started a month before Louisiana schools had started. And so I was naturally behind the curve. And then I was going, because it was 7th grade, I was going from Louisiana history to Texas history. So I was really thrown off the boat. I was really academically astray, for lack of a better word. And I'm sitting in my history class, which is in a portable in Austin, Texas. I'm sitting in my history class and we're getting around 1800s, 1900s, and I'm flipping through the pages of the book. And I realized that slavery has been reduced to a paragraph. And I remember looking around the room, right? Because I just came from a city in New Orleans where, though it may not have been taught in school, I was in a predominantly Black community where we had after school programs that were being run by all sorts of people for free, just so that we would learn who we were, because there was nothing written that taught me my history as a Black woman. And now I'm in a different place, and I realize not only is it not here in this textbook, but I'm surrounded by people who will just never know. So they'll grow up, and then when faced with the term white privilege, or when faced with the idea of a balancing the scale of anti-racism curriculum, they become defensive because they generally just had no idea. The idea of privilege, and the thing here with privilege is, once you know, you just need it to be acknowledged. People are just asking that you acknowledge that privilege exists. If you don't know, it's all right, because I'm here to teach you, and people are going to share their story. So we will give you this grace. What's the problem here? Why are a lot of people hurt right now having Facebook conversations? Because they're just, once people are discovering they have privilege, it's the actions that they take after. And that's what's hurting people. You didn't know, and now you know, and for some reason you feel like you have something to lose. There is enough food at the table for everyone. There's enough tables in the room for everyone to have their own table. No one is trying to take. And the idea that there's something to take just further proves that there was a system made, there was a game rigged from the beginning to only elevate certain people. That's what we're trying to dismantle. That's what needs to be broken down. And we're not asking for an apology. No one wants an apology, but we want action. We want love in action. We want to see those apologies in work, and we want to know what can happen from here, what we can do from here. So here's a homework assignment and something I would like you to jot down. Will you please acknowledge on paper what your privilege is and what privileges you may have? And as you write that down, I'm going to tell you a little tale, but I would love for you to write. When I first moved to Houston and I was working at North Shore Senior High School, I'm looking at a predominantly Black class, and I grew up in New Orleans in, of course, not of course, but in lower socioeconomic areas. And I saw all sorts of forms of structures and teachers just trying to make things work, even though there wasn't the financial backing to make those things work. So here I am, and I go from 7th Ward, New Orleans, to North Austin, where I went to Anderson High School. And every friend that I had and everyone I knew was white. And I can think of 2 other people in that school that were Black. Grew up there, went to Texas State University, and then we circled back, and here I am at this is my 2nd or 3rd teaching job, and the first time that I have predominantly Black students. And even when I was pushing my kids and pushing my students to work, and I'm like, come on, you can just do it, blah, blah, blah. I didn't realize that I had been nurtured and grew up in a space where there were several different resources at the ready just because of the school I was zoned at, even though at one point in time, I was homeless and living with multiple families. I still had access at that school to things that the students in front of me did not have access to. Sharing the same skin color as those students, still don't have the right to tell them, well, I did it, so you do it too. That's a bootstrap narrative. That's saying, just come on, buckaroo, just get to it, and what are your excuses? Those students are carrying a multitude of things in their class. So I have to acknowledge that's the difference, and I have to meet those students where they are. Hope you a chance to write a little bit. So music teachers, again, if you're not a music teacher, we were making references that apply to everyone. Let me back up one. Boom, 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 boom. I did it. Okay. So what does privilege look like in music education? Well, it looks like technique over musicality, notation over natural oral skills, replication over creation. And I'm gonna stop right there because there's a lot of composers who didn't like people who looked like me or even looked like you. And we keep putting those same songs, those same masterworks on over and over again, even when we get information about the intents and the hearts of these composers and the real purposes of this repertoire. We are so tied to replicating a masterwork that we don't give new, beautiful birthed music a chance to stand for what we stand for as a generation. And then Western over world. And we have the idea of Western music as a platform, as a foundation, and then everything is other. Okay, how many concerts have you been to when the spiritual was last? Well, it's fun. We just need something that's energetic. But you haven't taught the kids, you haven't taught people, you haven't taught your audience what the pain and the root and the joy of that repertoire was. And if we just do it as a checkbox, Black composer, checkbox, we got the spiritual or the other piece, we have once again done a disservice and allowed that fence to still be up and still exist. Let's take a moment to talk about mapping out roles in social change, because we're in a world of social change. When you are looking for your place, because that's what I hope some of your goals are being here today, is what can I do, what's next, right? Well, in the map of social change, thank you, Dr. Marcia Ray, for helping me with this. You have people who are guides, who are experimenters. Of course, we know we have frontline responders and how important they are. There's a link that you will get at the end of this. It's already ready, that has the details for all of these descriptions. You have builders, you have caregivers, you have healers, storytellers, but I want to make notice to one thing. You also have disruptors. In order for there to be change, something has to be disrupted. And that whole narrative of, well, you know, when everything goes back to normal, how many of you have been in a Zoom meeting where you've heard that? It's okay, guys, we're gonna push through because when things go back to normal, we're gonna be just fine. Well, I don't know about you, but in the 2 days before Michigan State University shut down, it was March 9th. When I left campus on March 9th, I called a dear friend of mine, Connor Copine, composer, and I said, I don't know if we are going to make it. We were overstressed, we were overworked. Time is but a construct and sleep is for when you're dead. That does not create the time for us to slow down, process, converse, and have human connection with other people. It just cannot happen. So something had to be disrupted. All of our lives were disrupted. And part of this social change is happening because we have the time to actually process and think about this content. What does racism look like and sound like, you know? Racism could look like escalated discipline actions. There was a case study, thank you, Rachel Linsmeyer, for putting me in this direction. There was a case study where they tracked the eyes of teachers, and the prompt question they were given was, going into your class before you get to know the students, what students do you believe are going to have the most discipline problems? And the teachers in the case study looked predominantly at students of color, and the number one kid they looked at were Black men in the classroom, young Black men in the classroom. Clutching your purse or crossing the street just because you see a person of color, there's a subconscious taught idea there where you check into fear, when you go to fear. Touching people without permission. And the idea that that's a compliment, oh, it's so pretty, so beautiful, it makes people of color, makes Black people feel like a pet. Even whether my hair was straight or curly or not, that is something that I have encountered multiple times. And my story reflects the story of many other people, because it's the simple action just says, there's something about you that is not thought of as a human, but is thought of as a thing. And I have permission. I just have permission to do that. And you do not have permission. And judgment of body language or a face. I had a clinician come in, if you are not a music person or arts person, well, you all are art people, but if you aren't used to that word, that means someone else is coming into my classroom. I have trusted them and I have paid them to work with my students. I had a student who identifies as Hispanic, but is white passing. And she was on the choir riser, seeing you participating beautifully, and the clinician goes to that student. The clinician is white and whispers in the student's ear. And the next thing you know, this young lady smiles, but it's the smile that doesn't reach the eye. And it like immediate, my heart raced, my heart went up. And I'm like, what did this person, what did this guest go and say to my kid? You know, I go up to the student when the clinic was over, and I wish that I would have addressed it with the person in the room, but I was frozen. And I said, what did that teacher say to you? And she replied back to me, oh, she told me to smile like a white girl. And I was just stuck. I was just frozen. And this is apparently something the student had been told multiple times by other people. That in itself, that statement that was supposed to uplift her, what you're saying is your natural face is not beautiful enough. So to feel joy and to be happy is to look white. That's what that statement is, which actually takes me into the, what does it sound like? It sounds like statements like that. It sounds like little microaggressions of, you know, I've never seen color. You know, when you say you don't see color, you're ignoring the history and the pain of other people. Derogatory terms and hate terms, the history of the N-word is something that I would love to go into in part 2, but we only have so much time in the day. To speak on a community of non-Black people, when you take something as tragic as COVID-19 and then call it the Chinese virus, whether you say that you know it or not, what you're doing is that you're not politicizing, but you're criminalizing an entire group of people. And that small gesture isolates people. So we have to be wary of language that isolates others and judges others, and assume cultural traits based on racial constructs. And then there's also, if I can, oh no, I've gone too far. Sorry about that. Just trying to move. Oh Lord. This is how many times I want you to see it. There it is. And then there's, watch out, y'all. And then there's the visceral responses that we get on social media. You know, the amount of conversations that I've had with people that attack me for no reason. And then they want to backtrack the more detail they go into. For example, I had a conversation with someone on Instagram when Eric Garner was murdered. And I was saying, wait a minute, be careful about that language because X, Y, and Z. And that person said, no, told me to shut up and refer to me as a porch monkey and said a lot of very painful derogatory terms. And then I swallowed my pride. And then I went into a conversation. I said, hey, can I talk to you directly? And we had a conversation in the direct messages of Instagram. And we talked for a while. And at the end of that conversation, this man who I do not know says to me, oh, sorry about all that earlier. You know, I was just so heated. You were so heated and defensive about who you are and what you stand for that the first jab that you had was to attack me for the color of my skin based on stereotypes. That's a terrifying thing. And that's why a lot of conversations aren't continuing, because people of color are stepping forward, trying to educate and trying to make their voices be heard and sharing their pain, and then they're being shut down with the ugliest statements. And the other side of that is the idea that nothing could happen, that a lot of people are hurt because of the absence of action. Well, just to be a little bit more clear about what that absence looks like, the book on the side here is a great one if you're looking for another resource. And this author says, to be racist and to be anti-racist means to be at the end of the walkway in the airport, you know, the little conveyor belt when you're like, look, I got off this plane, my legs hurt, I'm not trying to walk, and you're trying to stay on one side, right? To be anti-racist is to walk in the opposite direction of the walkway. So as time evolves, at one point in time, Black people were referred to as the N-word, and then it was Negro, and then it was colored, and then it was African-American, and then here we are with the term race, or excuse me, we're here with the term Black, right? To those evolutions happen in vocabulary because people are consistently walking against the grain and walking against the normal and educating people on what these words mean, which is why to stay still on the walkway is to be complicit with racism. A lack of action does make you complicit. That's why it was so important, and that's why people want every officer to be held accountable. We want all people to be held accountable, because when they say, well, only one person was arrested, well, someone was arrested, isn't that good enough? Those were narratives that we've been hearing. This happened, isn't that good enough? Those are the small victories we've been taking throughout history. But those who stand by and do nothing are also complicit. and are also preventing real change happening. So a question has been presented to me. So how do I start this conversation, right? Before we do that, you may have already done it, but I do want to give you a moment to write, what is your challenge? We addressed what our privileges were. So let's take a moment to talk about what is our challenge right now. Will you write what challenges you have? Is it the fact that you don't know how to start the conversation? And here's some STEM sentences for you. Is the struggle in your home, with your friends, with your family, your colleagues? What are you nervous about? What are you uncomfortable with? Is the challenge in your experience? Or the lack of having experiences in these areas, understanding other people's stories because of your lived experience, working on empathy? So once you have done that self-reflection and you're getting ready to have these conversations with people, this is a very helpful chart for me. I want you to consider intention, choice, compassion, and empathy, right? And ask yourself, do I need to, are my words coming from an inquisitive aspect? Is it coming from the desire to learn and to help? Or is it that I just need to express my feelings and I just want to throw them out into the atmosphere, whether they stick or not, right? When it comes to intention, are the things I'm going to say going to hurt someone? Choice, do they need to be said? Compassion, can I understand how the other person is actually feeling? And then most importantly, it always circles back to empathy. Can I see the other person's point of view? Listen to understand, not to respond. Consider your intent versus impact. These are things that we were talking about with microaggressions as well. Microaggressions as well. I'm always trying to move some beautiful faces that I see. I love them. I just want to drag you over here. There you go. All right. The intent versus impact. Sometimes things that can stop conversations and make them toxic and not productive it's always been this way. When things get back to normal, the bootstrap narrative, you should have made better choices. If you haven't seen Little Fires Everywhere, which is part of your homework assignment of choice. One of the things that I enjoy about that show is a particular scene in which someone with white privilege says, well, you should have made better choices. And then the other character responds with, you didn't make better choices, you had better choices. So let's make sure that we watch our vocabulary when talking to people and truly understanding their circumstances, the obstacles that were placed in their way and that were there before they even begin this race. And when you have conflict, when you hit a bump in the road with people, pause. Just take a pause. You have an internalized conflict with their idea, not the person themselves. I've had a lot of conversations that said, you know what, if you would like to continue this, here's my phone number, here's the email here. I want to continue this conversation, but we're not going to do it like this. I'm not going to show to your toxic arena and just start punching. I want to have a conversation. And a lot of times those come to a complete halt because people start reflecting in themselves and they're not ready. They didn't come to the table ready to eat. They came to the table ready to toss. Finding STEM sentences and asking questions. I love this, and a big shout out to the Instagram page that I pulled this from. There are things in our lives that are very easy to see and things that we don't see in our students. So make sure that you're asking questions if you don't know, and you can always start with, I'm nervous to ask this, but so on and so forth, or what would help me understand is, and if people aren't ready to share those aspects of themselves, that is their right. And you don't have to, and remember, not one Black person speaks for all Black people, okay? There are several different narratives and stories that you can go to, and that can be said about every nationality and every ethnicity and every culture. So if you mess up, apologize, but move on. The guilt will eat you alive, but the guilt is your body saying that you aren't ready for change. If you're ready for change, you're ready to grow, then you can just mess up, apologize, and we can move on and do this together, because it's all about having this open level of communication. what else can you do right now? Right, that's the thing. We can't go into certain institutions and demand change and write legislation for ourselves, but there are things that we can do right now. So let's highlight some of those things. Step one, the few minutes that I have presented and talked does not make you suddenly woke. It's not like bippity boppity woke. That's not a thing, okay? We've just started introducing some concepts. We just started vocabulary to have a conversation. So what we need to do, and you've already started doing it, is you started with self-reflection. Let me drag my friends on this side again. Hold on, moving you over here. Okay, so we started with self-reflection, talking about identities, privileges, and biases. So you do that self-reflection and then get organized, right? I was watching an interview with one of the organizers of Black Lives Matter, and they were talking about showing up to spaces in these different cities and people already being on the streets and protesting. The beautiful thing about that is that they were moved by passion, okay? Saw an injustice and they want to change, but they weren't organized. And then when things aren't organized, teachers, we know what chaos can brew. If the binders aren't in the right spot, if the risers aren't set up, if we don't know where the books are, we can have all the good intentions in the world, but good intentions can still yield bad results. We have to take our reflection. We need to make an action plan and get organized. And then we figure out our role. I'll give you more details of that in the link that will be provided. And Andre, remember to help me with that one, please. Remove symbols of oppressors. I have been grateful. I've been very grateful and I've been blessed that when I was living on my own, when I was about 16 or so, I lived with different people that I was in choir with. So when I say choir is my family, I mean it. The people who I've met and sang with to this day are my family. And I was living with a particular foster family in which I still am very close to my spiritual mom. And when they were first tearing down the statues across the South, the Confederate statues in the South. And my foster mom comes from a conservative background and was thinking, well, what is this? This is crazy. This is pointless. What's the big deal? What's the big deal? And then I said, and I was like, how do I make this stick? How do I make this stick to help her understand? Yelling's not going to make it happen because we both loud people. That's why we click, right? Ignoring it makes me complicit. Though I am Black, it makes me complicit. It says that I give up, right? It's a fatigue. So what can I do to make this stick? I slowed down and I thought, and I said, Mama, what would you say if I hung in my room, I hung up pictures and symbols of the people who had assaulted me? She was like, oh my God, that's terrible. Why would you ever do that? And then she paused and I said, think about it again. Listen again. Listen and process the subconscious and silent trauma that people go through when they go to their own town centers, when they go downtown, when they travel through a city that says it's based on love, melting pot, or whatever it is, and they see a statue dedicated to a group of people who lost the war. It's a reminder to say, but we still have your thumb on you. Why would I surround myself with symbols of oppressors? So we need to remove those symbols, whether it be the flag outside of your house or the flag that represents the mascot at your school. All of these things were rooted with that idea. So we need to remove that and replace it with symbols of greatness that represent our students and the things that our students need to learn. I saw one post where the teacher brought in a mentor that they had in their life who happened to be white, who empowered them, who made them feel strong. And the other kids brought in pictures of different people who made them feel strong and made them work and wanted them to be great. And one kid brought in a picture of the grandma and they posted it on a wall of fame. This is the wall of greatness that we aspire to live up to. And what a beautiful thing for a child to look at a Black woman, to look at a person of color, an Indigenous woman, and say, that gives me power. That's what people need to see. That makes me feel strong and that I can do anything. We add the symbols. Get to know your students individually, not generalizations. There's an activity that I do with a postcard, and I have kids make their own passports. And with those passports, they tell me their name and their class, they write their pronouns, something that didn't affect me, but I have to recognize that it affects someone. And so I will teach it to everyone, not just the kid who needs it, right? So I ask for pronouns, I ask for the name on the roster and the name that they choose, okay? the name that gives them power. And then I have them describe themselves using body positive language. So I'll say, Miss Morris, oh, my full name, Coty Raven Morris, name, Miss Morris, 5'9", black, that's the word that I use for myself, round nose, curly hair, often pulled up or back, plus size. All the kids always look up because subconsciously they've been taught to be plus size, to be fat. These things are automatically equal, evil, or bad, right? It's a purity danger thing, right? Something about this has to be bad. But when I say it, I'm writing plus size because that gives me power. I don't use the word fat, but you know who does? And now I can make this reference. Lizzo does. Lizzo says it. She doesn't care about anybody or what anyone else says. So if that gives you power, then write it. But I want to describe you the way that you describe you. And what you'll discover is that you'll have kids who feel empowered and you will engage with. And then they write on the back, they write facts about themselves they want me to know, or something that they want to work on a goal. And then you'll also get cards back when kids can't describe themselves. Friends, the more I do this research and the more that I give these presentations, I realize that it's not just bad or poor self-esteem that makes the young brown kid not be able to describe themselves, is because the only words they have about themselves are what other people have said about them. And they've generalized them so much, they can just describe themselves like a wanted ad, what they would see on the TV. We need to help our kids, we need to help a generation be able to articulate how beautiful they are and what they bring to the table. Other things that you can do, because we're just getting started here. Some of you are keyboard warriors. You know, you're at your house and you're on here going, ga, 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 ga. You're trying to make stuff happen, you're sharing resources. When you share resources, if you're gonna be a keyboard warrior, you have to fact check like crazy, because oppressors or people who are against the strength in humanity will always look for a hole in the narrative, and they will always look for an opportunity to bring you or to bring other people to the side of racism. An example of that is a conversation I had with someone who said, I want to be on the right side of this, but, and I was like, freeze. See, the thing is you didn't have all your facts in order, and there's only one right side, and it's humanity. It's equity. That's the only side here that matters. So any but is based on someone not fact checking and not having enough resources. You don't go back into that conversation until you're ready, you stop, okay? Adjust your curriculum, work environment, or household so you are conscious of others in a positive light. I say this because I had someone who we were hanging out, and as the day progressed, there were these subconscious microaggressions and jabs that came to me, and little things like I would say something like, oh well, I'm stuck, you know, here, and I'm working on this thing, but I'm having trouble with it, and they will respond with, oh well, Coty, that's abandonment, or Coty, that's just because of how you grew up. And I was like, wait, what? Like, where did that come from? And I'm like, oh, we're just kidding, like, and it's no big deal. Then as the conversation went on and went on, and I was ignoring it, right? This was someone who I'm close to, and they're saying these things that I just don't know how to respond back. I didn't have enough time to take pause. And then there was another, eventually there was a boiling point when, in response to a conflict I was having, the person says, well, it's because you're Black. And then I'm stuck. And I'm like, you know what? I need to escape the situation. I'm not ready to move forward. I'm not ready to continue it. I need to take pause for myself so I don't terminate a friendship when this is an opportunity to learn. Before I left, we made a comment about someone else who was of a different ethnicity. And I realized two things in that moment. One, there was a subconscious bias there that had not been addressed in this person. And that two, it was only when that bias came towards me that I noticed what I had been doing about somebody else, right? We need to be conscious of our vocabulary and the jokes and the things that we say from our teachers, what we audiate, right? This can be dangerous. If we don't have the right thing audiating in our brains, it's not going to come out of our mouths. So we need to make sure that we are prepared and conscious of those thoughts, whether they tell us something ugly about someone else, or if it tells us that we're not prepared for these conversations and that we can't win these battles. Slow down, process. I went back into that conversation when I was ready, and it was fruitful. And this person is my friend because we were able to have this conversation and discover those biases, discover that prejudice, and together we're going to move forward, right? We have an ally now because we took the time to learn. Create spaces for people of color to speak. If you don't know what BIPOC means, Black, Indigenous, People of Color, because again, we got to know what we're talking about before we start using things, right? I have a new job, and yay job. And in my new job, I'm just sitting here late at night, typing away. And I called my principal. I texted my principal and I was like, hey, what's going on? And he's like, yo, what's up? I said, can we talk for a little bit? My principal, who is a white cisgender male. And I say, look, I'm just letting you know, I didn't ask permission, but I said, I'm just letting you know that I'm gonna do this thing on Sunday. And I'm not gonna do something that's gonna make our school look bad. But he cut me off and he was just like, Coty, I need you to do the dang thing, do it. And I was like, for real? And he's like, do it, Coty. And matter of fact, you're gonna do it again in August. And you and I are gonna help this community. We're gonna do blah, blah, blah. This principal who runs this school with all these kids and in charge of all these things realized that the best thing that he could do was get out of the way. Sometimes you have to learn when to step out and let other voices speak, because we don't always have all of the words. We don't have all of the words. What I love this week with Andre Jackson, he posted that video and he got over 3,000 views, and it's still going. Marie Ellis posted her video and told her testimony and she got these views, and it was amazing. And even for me, it felt good to hear those stories. And I'm a social media fiend. I love to post my car thoughts. I love to share media, but I realized in this moment, the best thing I could do was get behind this PowerPoint and get ready for this moment and let those voices, my other brothers and sisters and in between, let them speak, so that we could get ready and continue this conversation. This is us taking turns, right? There's some things that we can listen to. So if you want to take a snapshot of that, this is all available. All of this stuff is typed, so you don't have to rush to screenshot. But you have some homework here, right? There are things that I want you to be able to listen to and have access to and share with other people. There are things that you can watch. This is not the full list. This is just some. There are things that you can read. And at the end of this, we're about to go into some questions in a little bit. At the end of this, we're going to talk about sharing these resources. Oh, excuse me. We're going to talk about what homework that I have for you. Don't worry, it's not an essay. There's no due date. It's your spiritual homework that you have the opportunity to do and that I'm not forcing you to do. But I challenge you to go about finding one of these resources. I have well, this is not my copy. This is someone else's copy, but I have my copy here at the ready of these books and many, many more. So there were some questions that I was given ahead of time that I want to make sure that I address. Andre, you want to turn, if your camera's not on, if you want to turn your camera on, and
Yeah.
if someone can, yeah, okay. And I can't see you, but I know you're there in spirit. And if you have something that you want to hop in and say, just get my attention, let me know. One of them is, how do I keep up this momentum? You cannot do this stuff by yourself. When Hurricane Harvey happened, which heavily impacted the Houston area, of all the things that were on the news cycle, if you're from the Houston area, from Texas in general, there was a big, there were a lot of news reports about the creatures and the animals that were finding themselves in people's backyards, right? Because of how high the floodwaters were. And one of the things that people were discovering, scientists were discovering, were that fire ants, people were having a lot of fire ants in their house. And the fire ants, they move in a giant ball in the water. But when you look at a microscopic level, what's actually happening is that the fire ants are in a ball and they're rotating in the water. I know it sounds disgusting, but if you ever watch it, it's a fascinating thing to see. And what's happening is that the fire ants at the bottom are working and working and working and moving and doing the groundwork while the ants on the top come up for air. And then they crash into a new home. They crash into your door. Sorry about your carpet. They crash into the door and then they build land there, right? So even the ants realized that when their home was under attack, they came together and worked to find a solution, to find a new safe space. But they can't all be on the hustle. Everyone can't be outside at the protest. Someone has to be talking to children. Someone needs to be working on the minds of older generations. Someone needs to be writing legislations and getting organized, right? You can't keep this up forever. So don't let, if you are fatigued after 10 days, we've only had 10 days of protests, but look, now I believe it's 12, but look at the work that has been done, because we collectively kept our foot on the gas pedal, but people do have to come up for air. Andre, do you have anything to add to that?
keep learning. Keep asking. Not how are you doing, but how can I better serve your community? How can I be a better ally for you? You have to want to learn, and you have to keep making yourself available and vulnerable to learn. Go on, good.
Thank you. Did I skip a question? Okay, so the momentum. Okay. What do the kids really need from me in this moment as their elementary school teacher? This came from a colleague who was describing her previous job, and it was very similar to mine. When the majority of the kids, we're talking over 80 kids, 80% of kids are on free or reduced lunch. The previous school I was at, 98% of the school was on free and reduced lunch. We're talking about highly diverse in ethnicity populations. So I just want to be really clear about what we say with the word diverse, because diversity is the equivalent of having all the Skittles in a bag, but they're separated by color. So just because all the colors are in the room does not mean that equity is actually happening. So be aware of that. The school is diverse with a multitude of ethnicities, and there's the funding and things to make things happen. And there are these, looking for the right word here, there were behavior responders, right? That would, anytime there was a problem with the kid, they were instructed in the school to do pull out. So they're told to send the kid out of the classroom in order for there to be change. And this person has decided that they no longer want to be at this school, and they feel like they failed their kids. So like, what do my students need? Well, first and foremost, your students need you to be present. They need consistency. They need love. They need stability in their structure, and they need to see your authentic joy. Students in these types of schools, well, first off, children can smell a fraud a mile away. And if you don't really step in the room with love, you've already lost them. Black students, Black, Indigenous, people of color, our Latin community, they can smell a fraud, but because of privileges set against them, they've been taught in their homes to be on guard because the world isn't going to take care of them. So they walk in your classroom also thinking you're going to fail them. And when we don't set up our classrooms with love, when we don't get to know our students as individuals, we've set them up for failure. But to that teacher who thinks, did I fail my students? That something here in the school wasn't working. You know, I go get the degrees, I get the education, and I feel like I'm failing. Have I failed? No, that system failed you, and you don't know what to do. And there needs to be something above you in place. Every teacher has to be on board, every teacher. There's another question, well, I'll get into that, but Dre, do you have anything to add there?
No, go on.
All right. How can I navigate these conversations about my identity? Okay, so this comes from someone who does not identify as Black, and I've gotten this question from a multitude of people. This may look like, can you still see me? I had an internet issue. Am I still there?
Yeah, you're good.
Yeah, thank you so much. It said unstable. Maybe my computer was moved. It was like, oh, Coty, truth. All right, hold on to internet. We ain't done here, okay? So this, whether this was a Hispanic young lady who is being presented with a statement from Black colleagues and friends of, well, you didn't care before and now you care. Now suddenly you have a voice and you only choose to be about the cause when it's convenient for you. And this person is having to stop and reflect on their own identity and how they have fit in. I've also heard a similar question from someone who is half Black, half white, right? And the term mixed, there are people who I know who are biracial who are comfortable with that term. And I'm continuing to learn myself about what different people who are biracial prefer to be called by. So please forgive me if that's not the vocabulary word that I should be using. I look forward to being educated more in that area. However, this person was saying, I'm not Black enough for my Black friends, and I'm not white enough for my white friends. And when I hang out with my white friends, they say things like, oh, well, you speak so well, or what would happen to me when I was in school, when I would hear friends who were white say like really ugly, another identity area, they would say really ugly things about Black people and talk about stereotypes. And then someone would respond with, well, you're friends with Coty. And then they would say, yeah, but Coty's different. So that was how they excused themselves out of the hateful things they said, which leads back to, I'm not racist because I'm friends with, but you just said your actions have told me something else. So the best advice that I can give right now, and I would love to talk about this more in part 2, rebuilding, and especially going to it in the healing in the last one. This is the advice that I learned from my therapist when it comes to PTSD. And FYI, all of us, we're in a state of trauma. So this applies to all of us. When people only know portions of your story, they will fill in the rest. So when you're trying to have these difficult conversations, when people only know bits and pieces that we're ready to share, then they will fill in the rest of the narrative for us on our own lives, and then we'll lose the control that we had over ourselves, and see how that's impacted on a structural level. I have a friend here in Michigan who is biracial, and when wondering if they should post things on Facebook or not, we had a conversation that by posting that he needed the mental space to process what was happening and watching Black men dying, by posting that, he had to actually say out loud, I am Black too. And the backlash of that, his fear was that he would discover that his friends did not see that part of him, right? If people only know parts of you, they will fill in the rest of that. Do you have anything to add, Dre?
I'm taking in all of this. I've helped her prepare this, y'all, but to hear it just like right now, I'm still taking all this in, and you're putting me on the spot right now. We were talking about that.
I'm so sorry.
No, it's okay. I haven't reviewed these, so I'm still trying to navigate through it. But go on, good. Beautiful.
Okay. The full question here says, I am a white teacher and I have an angry young Black student who will not listen, disturbs class, so on and so forth. What do I do with that anger, and how can I, as a white teacher, be what this student needs? And I wrote some notes just to be ready for this one. I think it's important to remember that anger is not personal. It's not an attack on you. I think because we grew up on the magic of, like the Magic School Bus and some form of PBS, children's TV shows, that we thought that we were going to walk into these perfect situations and we're all going to hold hands and everything's going to be perfect and there's going to be no conflict. But then we get a reality check when we first start teaching. And the example that I've said to my Texas teacher friends is there's an exam that we have to take, that you all take in a different form of, it's called the PPR in Texas. And we are taught, I was taught by my college professors at Texas State to take the exam as if we're in a perfect world, okay? It's conflict one, we're not. But if we're in a perfect world, here's the question at hand. Tommy, you're teaching math, and Tommy throws a chair, period. This is Tommy's first offense. What are you going to do? Well, the choices there, the right answer in this perfect world is that we're going to have a parent conference, and then I'm going to make a phone call and everything's going to be peachy keen. Let me tell you something. If Tommy throws a chair in your class, that is not Tommy's first offense. Tommy has been doing a series of things to get your attention. He's been crying out for help and trying to express this anger. It may not even had started as anger. It started as asking for help, and then you weren't available after school, needing lunch and not knowing how to ask for the proper forms to get his lunch. Wondering, he came to school and he didn't have his supplies because Tommy had to help little brother, little sister, and grandma before he left for school, and mom is working the night shift. And he shows up to your class, and then you put him in a corner and tell him he can't sing today because he doesn't have a pencil. That's why Tommy is angry. Tommy had a pot on the stove that was boiling over, that was ready to boil over, and then we take a discipline action because we made a generalization and we didn't talk to that student individually. That anger is not towards you. It is a multitude of events that have built up because people didn't listen. So we need to have a structure and a team of teachers, the entire school, the entire community. What happened to it takes a village to raise a child? That village needs to have the same ideals. We have to have the same vision in order to help people. Dre, you good?
Mm-hmm.
All right. I'm moving. Did I do it? I'm tired of having to explain this stuff to people. What do I do? Well, first and foremost, I just want to remind you that it is other people's responsibility to look for these resources. And in the roles that you have, the role you may have is not passing on resources to everybody. Not everybody has to be the library, okay? And you do not have to be open 24 hours. You have permission to shut down. You have permission to turn off. I had one of my best friends called me at the end of the day, and I was getting ready for bed, and I just wanted to talk to a friend. I just wanted to talk to a friend, but they still had this content on their mind. And so when we were talking, it was eating at me. I felt this migraine kicking in. It's not that I didn't care about the topic. Of course I care about this, but the library had shut down. That is not my role. I'm in the role of healing right now. I got to take care of myself. So just like a soldier, we got to build our strength and come back to another day. Take care of yourself. Don't let, be the fire ant. That's really what I'm trying to say here.
Can I add to that?
I think, yes, you sure can.
Sure. I'm tired of having to explain this stuff. What do I do when I find myself tired right now? Just speaking from perspective, I have to shut down. I have to turn everything off, and I have to go find my source of normalcy, and I have to find a source that is going to pour into me, because you're going to spend so much time pouring into others, and you're also going to get hit with that backlash. So you need time to recharge, eat, drink, sleep, love on yourself, and then come back to this. It is a privilege to be able to walk away from it, but it is a right and a necessity for you to sleep and take care of yourself. That's so important. Please do that. Go on.
Yes.
Good.
Yes, that is awesome. That's awesome. What do I do with these feelings of guilt? Robin DiAngelo says guilt is not a super productive feeling, because it just sits with you. It just weighs you down, and it fills you with doubt. If that doubt part of a revelation and a rewiring of your brain, then that's one thing. But if you sit in it and you're not productive, you're just spoiling. You're just fruit spoiling on the ground. We are collectively right now grieving together, and you're a part of this conversation. So when you go to someone and that guilt asks you to apologize, just know that people are looking for you to give, that amends have to come with action. Don't sit in that guilt. Dre, do you have anything to add in that area? I really want to talk about this in part. No?
Go on.
All right, and I threw this here for a reason, right? So what guilt has led some people to do is to be part of cancel culture. If you haven't heard your child say it right now, you probably saw it on social media. Cancel culture is when you see a certain composers, or you see certain people write things, and you're like, suddenly, oh no, we are the collective fighting and advocating for equality. We no longer mess with this person, and we're no longer doing this thing. We saw it with Daniel Elder. We saw it with the NFL. And I see it in some communities in Texas with the PML, which is our prescribed music list. I see a surge of people who are saying, we need to get rid of these songs and we shouldn't be performing these songs. But are you canceling this because you actually believe it, or does it just look good for your product? Does it just look for your brand? Is this your way of just trying to prove that you're not racist? That's not productive. You can't keep momentum if you're just doing this for show. It's the equivalent of taking selfies at a march. That does nothing for nobody. So be cautious of it and check your intentions, check your facts, and then be on the team with a purpose. How do I talk to my students about this? Well, it's as simple as you just do it. And that sounds easier said than done, but when I have a student in class, like a young man who talks about, we're like, oh, I didn't even sign up for choir. Choir is gay. I could take out the whole dissertation about all the reasons why that is wrong, or I can just say, no, we don't do that. That is hateful. We don't say that here. Tell me why you said that. Help me with the choice. And then from a high school boy, you're gonna get, they have nothing. They don't have receipts. They don't have facts. They don't have a response, because that narrative was put in their head just to have a subconscious element of hate. And when they encounter someone in the LGBT community, they're going to activate that on a very dangerous level. You shut it down when you encounter it, and then you fill that space with love. That's the part that people forget. Just because I'm upset at that kid because of the statement that they said does not mean that I forever judge them for that statement. Do you understand what I'm saying? We're not doing that here. all right, get your stuff, return to this page. And what I love is their reaction to me moving on is more shocked than when I call them out on the word, because kids are so used to being chastised into guilt, but they're not used to the narrative being replaced with love. Other thing, and there's all sorts of examples that I have here. There was a Sesame Street special that came out yesterday, and there's examples and metaphors that I use a lot to redirect that conversation. But I would just say, reveal to kids that the world is not the prettiest place, and they have the opportunity to change it. And it begins with their vocabulary. Teach through your experience. Dre, anything on that last one?
Listen to them too. I sit with my kids a lot, and yes, they are in middle school, but they've informed me a lot more just about what's going on in the world, just by listening to them, asking them how they interpret all of this. Ask them how and who they're hearing this stuff from. It's so important to allow them to speak as well. They spend the entire day listening. Let them speak. They have a voice, and if we don't, we have enough things to do. So if we don't allow them the space to speak, it will never get talked about, and then they're going to grow and go on and on and on with that fixed mindset. But I think we'll talk more about that in part 2, actually.
Yeah. The last thing I want to say on this question is I kept it here for a reason. I'm so glad we circled back. There are, from urbanintellectuals.com, there are Black History flashcards. And I have that double pack set, right? And in my double pack set, this is my card about Ruby Bridges. And if you don't know the story of Ruby Bridges, who is still alive, I believe she's only 65 years old, born in 1954. Am I right? Thank you for the head nods. And there are several interviews where you can learn the story of Ruby Bridges and how she was the first Black child in a integrated school in New Orleans, and how everyone stops the story right there. But no one says how many parents and came to that school, not children, how many parents came to that school and pulled their kids out of school that day, that her first day of school, that she spent the whole day in the office. It was the illusion of integration. It was a small victory of change. We're not actually working on change. But there's only one teacher in the school who was even willing to teach Ruby. And Ruby will say that she learned 2 things that day, that 1, there is good in the world, but 2, apparently only white people could be teachers. That's my first memory of music, was seeing a white woman teach me. And that was I never thought that I could even be a music educator myself, because this is all that I saw in front of me. Well, there's a particular interview where Ruby says that she was on the playground, and she, when they finally let her play, and she would go at the end of other kids' recess, and she went up to a young boy who was clearly white and said, "Why won't you play with me?" And he said, "My mama said I can't play with you because you're the N-word." And then he went away. And what I found so profound in that interview is Ruby said, "I wasn't mad, because I would have done the same thing if my mama told me to do it too." Hate and racism, one and the same, are taught traits. And if they can be taught, they can be untaught. None of that is so ingrained in people that you can't rewire their brains, right? We can teach against that. I think this is the last pre-question that I have for today. Am I allowed to be happy? When I saw that, it made my heart melt, but it was I needed to see it myself. Anybody who's been part of this project, which brings us here today, knows in me the panic attacks have been real. The stress has been real. The imposter syndrome to do this presentation has been real. Being bombarded with the realities of the world and the video footage, and feeling like I can't put my phone down because I'm going to miss something that's important. It's been a lot. But in the words of a friend that quoted from someone else, I'll find the quote for you, that said, "In our life, we have triggers and we have glimmers, and we are capable of feeling multiple feelings at the same time." If you don't fight this fight, right? If you aren't working on being anti-racist, that doesn't mean that you are not fighting in order to feel joy. You're just giving yourself a placebo effect. That's just avoidance, which is an aspect of trauma. It's the 3rd stage of PTSD. Don't avoid this. Embrace this journey, and then also look for images of joy, right? There is joy. When we fight together, when we hold hands, and as a collective, we decide to do this, there is joy to be celebrated in that. Yes, you can be happy. You can be happy because you're going to be part of change. be happy because you find solutions. You can be happy because taking the pain that was on your heart and today you put it on paper. You took time to actually write out your words and your thoughts and leave it there. I tell kids, if we can put it on paper, anything is possible. Anything is possible. Your woes, if they can't escape those lines, we can do anything, right? So don't let joy is part of resistance. Don't let the only images you see be of people angry and enraged and crying. Don't let the only footage you have in your mind of a Black man be of him dying. Surround yourself with images of beauty and hold those up as mantles of why we should fight. To keep joy, we have to fight. I work on a choir camp right now because I have to hope that in this, I can still have a beautiful experience for kids. We work on the fall. That's what we did with virtual choirs. We worked on the fall. Or we do all this stuff so to make sure that we're ready for our students in the fall. What brings me here today, and one element that I forgot to say, is look at how many institutions in our life were so quick to tell us that we need to figure out how to use Google Meet and Zoom and insert Facebook Live here and all of these things. They told us to do that, but the silence. There was silence when there were people who were being murdered, and we have to come together and replace those ugly images with joy, with beauty, so there can truly be a victory. Dre, did I miss anything? So here we are on the wrap up, friends. I'm not sure how long I talked, but my spirit feels better, and I hope that that's because I've shown you something that will help you. Few final thoughts. Give yourself some grace in this. Give yourself grace. You're gonna mess up and it's okay. If you come to the table, be ready to eat, right? If you gotta take a break, if you're full, digest, come back, and we'll still be here. We'll still be here. Don't let fear and power drive your classroom, okay? If you encounter a situation and you don't know what to do, reach out for other people, reach out for help. Keep this conversation going, keep this momentum going. Know when to take your breath. Language is essential to change. You have to change your vocabulary. Be aware of the things that you say on your own and your own thoughts, because it will provide a healthier playground, a healthier battleground for what we're going into. Amend should match your actions. So don't just say sorry and then, like I tell a kid comes to me and they mess up in class, and I've seen them do the same thing over and over and over again. And what will they say? Oh, Miss Morris, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Don't show me that don't tell me that you're sorry. Show me that you're sorry. I have to see this in action. And you don't have to be afraid or feel guilty or have a degree in this studies or any of this to care for humans. You don't need a degree to do that. You don't have to read the book to just love humans, but you have to do something. You cannot be stagnant. You cannot have, there has to be an action. And if you really love people, love is synonymous with action. It is a verb. Love is not just a noun. So friends, I implore you to show your love in action as the verb that it is and take a step forward. So I got some homework for you. The next dates are June 14th and June 27th. Tomorrow we're making the new events. The 14th we'll probably have breakout rooms. We're still working on that. And then on the part 3, notice that it's 2 weeks after, because we're leaving Father's Day open and we're being respectful of your families and how you observe Father's Day. And if you observe Father's Day, and bear with us as we do this, because remember, this was a brainchild just a week ago, and the amount of people that have come to the plate to work on this is crazy, and we weren't giving ourselves grace either. I was just having a conversation with Rachel and Andre and Becky, and we're like, well, what if we had form, and what if we had this, and blah, blah, blah. And they were like, we just made all this up. We're just trying to create the space. Please join the Being Human Together Facebook page, where we're going to continue this conversation, and where if you would like to do your homework out loud, you can do it on that page. Let's do.
So you're also gonna provide the link of the resources.
Yes, so we're about to put that, we're gonna put that in the page right after we make sure the video was recorded and post that up. The resources have numbers that we know that work if you're wanting to donate. We have a ton of articles. If you're like, oh no, Amazon's taking too long. There are There are countless amount of articles that have already been vetted, so you don't have to worry about that. There are other groups that you can join, whether they be support groups or resource groups. Being Human Together, we're trying to make sure that you can also see those different groups. If you're looking for just to talk about music that we shouldn't be programming anymore, join Decolonizing the Classroom. There's a whole list of podcasts. There's also the Score with Eric Jimenez. There's a series of places that you can reach out to find some stuff. But your homework from me in written journal form is I would love for you to write a self-reflection after this webinar. When this ends, before you get up and you take that jog or you cook a meal or you cook lunch, just write and process and put it on paper. And we're going to talk about what our roles is in social change. I'm going to have the descriptions of those roles. Again, thank you, Dr. Ray, for helping me with that. We have descriptions of those roles, and I want you to think about what those roles are, and then I want you to make a plan of action. And we're going to give you that resource link to dive in. If you want to share out loud, you can do it in the Being Human group. If you want to keep for yourself, you can just keep this for yourself. The idea is to build the habit of processing this information. This is the kind of stuff I told my students to do, but I didn't do for myself. And then I wonder why my spirit was in such turmoil. And I'm not lying to you. So if you want to share with me, feel free to send it to me at cotyraven88@gmail.com. Everyone got your homework assignment? Now for CPE credit, Becky, are you back?
Yeah, Coty, I got a bunch of screen sharing things that I can kind of offer you and catch up for all the ending stuff.
Okay.
Do you mind if I shared my screen with them real quick?
Yeah, do I stop? Do you kick me off or what
Yeah,
happens?
just stop your screen.
Oh, I have to hit the escape button. Stop share.
All right. Let's see. All right, again, guys, sorry about some of the difficulties that we had. This is Rhythmic Force Percussion. We're live on the Den Collective and like Google Meet, and we have all these forums kind of up and running right now. The link to this forum is shared in all of those places, and we really can't stress enough to you to check this out. This is also where you educators can get professional development credit. I just want to show it to you so you know where to go, and we all, again, really want you to go hit up this form and start making some change. The first thing it's going to do is going to ask you for your email. Okay, and it's going to ask you for your name and date. Pretty easy. This page right here is the page I wanted to stress to you guys. This is the link where we can donate to Coty's work on Being Human Together and kind of help her take this where she needs it to go. That's the most important page to me. There's some feedback here that is going to go straight to the Coty and the Coty Educators of Texas. And the code for CPE credit is Breaking Ground. You can see it on my screen here. And again, for all you guys in Zoom, because I can't send it to you directly, this is the form. So you can like screenshot, copy paste, type it in manually, however you want to do it. And the code is right there below. And I think that's it for us, Becky. We're planning to do part 2 live. I think we got our kinks worked out. Becky, do you have anything else?
Oh, is she here?
Okay, I'm not sure. I'm good, Coty.
I don't think so. But don't forget, we explained that CPE credit thing. I just want to make a quick thank you to Andre Jackson, De'Evan Johnson, Colleen McNichol, Jessica McKiernan, Rachel Linsmeyer, Rhythmic Force Percussion, Marimba One, the Coty Educators of Texas, Dr. Marcy Gray, Donnie Minger, Maria Ellis, and just the multitude of voices who are Brandy Pace, Colton Blake, whether you were helping me with resources or you were someone that I could just lean on when working on this content. I'm super, super, super grateful. And thank you for being part of this team, this growing team. And thank you all who are still watching and who have watched today. We are all part of the same collective team for equity and inclusion and just a beautiful change. Becky's here. Does she want to say anything? Let's see if she has anything to say about the CPE credit. Jordan, do you see Becky?
Yeah, I think I got her in.
Okay.
She should be unmuted.
There we go. Sorry, I was popping in and out of Google because I was able to actually put the link in the chat there. So y'all can hit me up too, like those of you that know me, if you need that link, no problem. Did I miss anything? Like,
No, that's it. That's it. We just saw you and we just want to make sure we didn't miss anything. That's it.
I think that's it. I do have one more thing to say. Coty, thank you for putting this together, for being the brain and the child behind all of this. You just lead in such an inspiring way. You lead through action. You've always been a big sister to me and now to the world. Just keep doing exactly what you're doing. We hear you. We see you. I am fully behind you, and whatever I can do, I'm here. Thank you for taking your time and your labor and putting this together today. I am so proud. This was so awesome. So yeah.
I very much appreciate it. We're just getting started, friends. We're just getting started. This is just me being aware and accepting what my role is in social change. So I'm excited for you to learn what your role is. I'm excited to see you put that role in action. And I look forward to seeing you all at our next conversation. Let's go. Dance. Peace, love, and blessings. Thank you so much, everyone. And enjoy the rest of your day. Bye, everyone. Feel like